Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Uncensored CMO. Now, I'm joined by the founder of Omaze, Matt Pohlson. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Thanks for having me, John. I'm excited to be here.
Great. Now, I don't usually do this, but there are not many people that walk into this studio and the first thing they tell me is they've had a near-death experience. So, I mean, maybe we should start there. It's not the usual place I start, but you had quite a life-changing event happen, didn't you, about 7 years ago?
I did. So I had this crazy near-death experience where my mom, saved my life and, changed my life. It changed our business, everything. But someone compared it, they're like, the power she unlocked to be able to save you is similar to what a founder can unlock to save their company. You know, there's this they feel like it's their child and they will fight through existential crisis to make it continue. It's a really crazy story. I was I flatlined for 4.5 minutes. They declared me dead. They brought me back to life. And then when I came back from that, it was very clear. When I was leaving the hospital, the doctor sat at the edge of my bed and he said, look, when I finish my career 30 years from now and I'm talking about the most extraordinary case I've ever seen, this is going to be it. We had you at less than 0.1% chance of survival.
0.1?
Yeah. And the fact that we have you going home with your full faculties, we have no medical explanation for that.
What happened to you? What was the...
I was born with my stomach twisted in a knot, and then I was supposed to die when I was born, and then the scar tissue from that surgery freakishly broke off all these years later, created a bowel obstruction, which led to my heart stopping. And then literally my mom was at the hospital and burst into the operating room as I was being resuscitated and helped coach me back to life. There's all this other crazy stuff that happened too, but it's a wild story.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that changed your business?
Yeah, because when I came back from that, I was the doctor said to me, he was look, we have no medical explanation for this. And I said, do you have any explanation for this? And he said, we're inspired by your mom. And she had also, before the second surgery, she was grabbing the doctors by the cheeks, looking into their eyes, saying, this is my son, but today this is your son and this is your brother. And their company's trying to do good. You need to help them. Wow. But he said, but outside that, there's larger forces at play. And I said, well, how do you define larger forces? And he said, it was love that brought you back. And then I really believe that. So when I came back, I was we're never going to truly make an impact at a global scale by just doing celebrities. And so that was the motivation to switch the business. And so I came back and said to the whole company, the board, we're switching the business to prizes, and got a lot of resistance, but we did it, and then it changed everything.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, going through something like that must fundamentally change who you are and how you see life, Yeah,
it really has changed me fundamentally, but not in the way that I expect. It wasn't immediate. It wasn't Hollywood-esque. It was actually in some ways I was incredibly elated for a while and then kind of depressed for a while, not knowing why that had happened and why did I get to keep going. And then this kind of, you felt this pressure of people saying you're here for a reason and all this stuff. You're
wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot of that, and you're wow, that's a lot. I think it's really changed my relationship to fear. I used to be really fear-driven, fear of failing, fear of not being enough, fear of comparing myself to others. And so that was my motivation in some ways. That's where I kind of operated from. And now I have learned that fear is just a story, right? And nothing is as bad as the fear of the thing, right? When you face death, which is supposed to be the scariest thing, and you realize, okay, that was actually not that bad, then it helps you kind of move past the fear faster, right? And so I try to operate more from a place of love. You can make the same two decisions, right, out of a fear or love, right? You can fire people out of fear, or you can fire people out of love. And so I try to make it much more from that place, expansive, relaxed place. So that's one, and I really try to practice that on a daily basis. The second is I believe a lot of things that I didn't believe before, but I really believe that I see how interconnected we all are in ways that I didn't. And I think that optimism and love is kind of woo-woo as that might sound, like, are frequencies that you can push out. And if you continue to like tap into those things, like, they can change the trajectory of events. And so I like work to get in the mindset to be in those places as much as possible.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. I mean, how the stories we tell ourselves are incredibly powerful. I mean, you talked about fear. I mean, I think fear is one of the biggest inhibitors in life and business, isn't it? But, we're perpetually worried about what might happen if this goes wrong, I'm not good enough to do this, and I think that the internal dialogue is very profound. And if you can find a way of resetting that, I mean, you had to go through a big experience to get there. But I mean, if you can do that without going through that big experience, I mean, I think so much of success or happiness in life is down to how we think about it, and how we view
absolutely
success. Isn't it?
You don't have to go through that, right? Like, that just became a trigger for me to become curious. Like, I didn't get any actual knowledge from the actual experience. It was just a reason to think about things. But yeah, I think, especially for in entrepreneurship or in business building, a lot of people who get success, it's because they kind of drive themselves and they maybe have this voice that says, you got to go harder, you're not enough. Like, and that's useful to a point. But I think what I've learned from this, especially on the entrepreneurship path, is you have to be a best friend to yourself, right? Like, you got to be really, like, I used to say stuff to myself that I would never let anyone else say to me, and I thought that was helpful. And then you realize that's not actually helping me. Like, it's much better to like kind of support yourself through the journey, still hold yourself to a high standard, but just say, okay, right. You're human, you made some mistakes. Let's like move on.
Yeah. Now, this event happened after you'd set up Omaze, hadn't you? So describe to me, what was the origin story for Omaze and why did you set it up in the first place?
Yeah, so before Omaze, I was a filmmaker. And my passion was using storytelling to inspire action, and had done a bunch of different projects along those lines. Me and my buddy were the first directors on this thing called Live Earth, which was the biggest concert ever thrown, 7 continents in one night with everybody from Beyonce to Rolling Stones. Did a documentary series called Girl Rising that was funded by Oprah. Queen Rani of Jordan, Meryl Streep was the narrator. A bunch of other big projects like those with really fancy people. And we were working with these incredibly influential people who really wanted to do good, and just realized we were not doing that much good. We were creating awareness around these projects, but not a lot of impact. So I decided to go to business school and surround myself with new ways of thinking. And I had never even opened Excel before I went to Wharton. I was purely on the creative side. And then when I was in school, I went to this event that Magic Johnson, the basketball player, was hosting, where he was auctioning off the chance to play basketball with him and go to a Lakers game. But it was one of those things that was only available to the high net worth individuals in the room. And I was in the room, but not a high net worth individual. I was like the guy who gets invited last minute to fill the table and comes for the free drinks. I was that guy. Still am that guy, I feel like. But and so, sat and watched as the auction went up to 15,000, and Magic was our childhood hero. There's nothing I'd rather do than play basketball with Magic, but we couldn't afford to participate. And so when me and my buddy were driving home, we said that makes no sense. Magic has fans around the world, not just in that room. And celebrities weren't really on social media yet, but we said they're going to be, and they're going to be able to reach their fans in a whole new way. So if we make it so anybody can donate $10 for the chance to win, you could raise so much more money, so much more awareness, open up a whole new donor base.
So, and what was the format so that people would buy tickets effectively with a chance of winning the Magic Johnson prize? Is that how it works?
Exactly, yeah. So for the first 7 years, we just did celebrity experiences. Yeah. And it was just exactly that format. You put in $10 for the chance to win, like a charity raffle. Yeah. And we did crazy stuff. We did ride in a tank with Arnold Schwarzenegger and crush things. We did win a Lamborghini where Pope Francis hands you the keys. We did sit with Jon Stewart underneath Stephen Colbert's desk while he's performing and like mess with him. We just did all these like really kind of fun stuff. And we would create really funny videos about what it would look like to ride in a tank with Arnold and crush things. Or Matt Damon and Ben Affleck would like talk shit to each other about who you'd rather hang out with. And those stuff would spread virally. And so our whole business was built on making, fun little stories about what the experience would look like.
Yeah. And as I understand it, part of the purpose of this was then to raise money for charity.
Oh, yes.
Alongside doing it, wasn't it? As well as getting access to prizes, you're also,
Yes, so the charity raffle was for the charity of the celebrity, so they would choose it.
Yeah. Now you made a big pivot, didn't you? Because you're now in the UK, and as far as my social media feed goes, you're giving away a lot of very nice properties in the Cotswolds.
Yes.
So that's certainly what I get in my feed.
Yes.
Dream homes coming up. So why did you make the move from US celebrity experiences to UK win your dream home kind of thing? How did that happen?
Yeah, it happened after I came back from the near-death experience. It just changed my perspective. It's really helpful to step back and you see some things that's hard to when you're in the day-to-day, and it just became clear that we were never going to be truly world-changing just doing celebrity experiences, because we were totally reliant on someone else for our supply. And before I left, we had done this campaign with Daniel Craig, where you got to go to New York, you got to go to the Aston Martin track, you got to ride around in a one-of-a-kind Aston Martin, and you got to keep the Aston Martin.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was supposed to raise $300,000 for the United Nations, and it raised $2.1 million.
Wow.
And so then I went to our CFO, Nina, and said, hey, I think we should try doing a car on our own, no talent, just Omaze. We should buy a $250,000 McLaren. We'll offer it with our own distribution. If we can raise $500,000 on our own, then we would really have something. But it was a big bet because we only had $900,000 in the bank at the time. So it was like more than a quarter of the company was on this bet. But we decided to go for it. And then that car coincidentally launched the day before I unexpectedly went into the hospital. And so when I came back all those months later, I was sitting down with Nina and said, hey, by the way, whatever happened with the McLaren? Did it raise to $500,000? Are we out of business? What's the deal? And she said it raised $1.9 million.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah. So I was like, that changes everything.
Yeah.
Because I had the fresh perspective. And so I was like, we are going all in on prizes. So I went to the team and the board and said, instead of doing these celebrities, we're going to stuff we control with the prizes. There was some resistance to that, but we pushed through and we started doing holidays, and then we did like bags and watches and jewelry, and then we started doing more cars, and then we started doing supercars. All those did progressively better. And then we finally said, where it's really at is houses. A car changes someone's lifestyle, but a house changes someone's life.
Yeah.
And it's an incredibly visual medium, and we could create a subscription product if we just did a house every month and really focused it. So we decided to launch that in the UK because the US celebrity car business was a good business. I mean, it was a 9-figure revenue business. It was real business, but we wanted to test it here, not disturb that business, but also thought because the UK is a more densely populated country, all the houses are relevant, they're a little bit less expensive. We had a great operator here named James Oakes, and we thought, okay, let's test it here. And then it just took off. It was wild.
Amazing. And do you have to buy the houses? Because I mean, like we're talking £4 or £5 million dream homes here. We're not, they're pretty expensive. Do you actually have to? Presumably, you can only give it away if you own the houses. So you've got to put a big outlay.
Yeah, we buy all the houses. Sometimes we're building the houses now, but in all cases we renovate the houses or put in pretty significant changes. But yeah, we buy them all out. So we're buying, because we offer a house every month. We've got to buy 8 houses out in front.
All of which are multi-million-pound houses, right?
Exactly. Anywhere from £3 to £6 million.
Yeah, that's quite a cash flow investment, presumably, isn't it?
It is. It is. You lose money in a market until you get up your subscription. We had raised money from venture, so that helped fund that. But then, we built up a subscription business, and the subscription revenue is really strong and really sticky, and so therefore there's no risk in the houses anymore.
So with subscription, does that mean people are automatically entering every draw?
Yes.
Is that effectively how to use? How much would that be, for example, typically?
£10 is the minimum. You can go up to 50.
And that just auto renews every month, and then you automatically get entered into the draw.
Exactly.
Yeah. So how many houses are you giving away to date?
40.
Wow.
So roughly around, call it 180 million pounds worth of houses, probably 250 million pounds worth of prizes.
And on the other side of the coin, how much have you given to charity off the back of that?
we've raised 90 million pounds in the UK for charity. In the US, before we moved here, we had raised 200 million for charity. So, globally, we're over 300 million that we've given to charity.
That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And what's the relationship is between the kind of charity and, I guess, the lottery or game, however you describe it? Because it seems to be quite common thing to do, put those two things together. I was just wondering what the psychology of that is. Is it that like people like to feel? Do people play more if they know that they're also going to, make some good? Is there some psychology behind that, or is it what's the thinking behind the charity element, or is it driven more by your personal desire to do good and leave a legacy? Yeah,
it really started with I was in that space for a decade before I started Omaze. Like that goes way back to my childhood and like what my parents instilled in me. I grew up in Laguna Niguel, California, which is like a upper middle class area. But I joined a basketball team when I was really young that was based out of Compton, which is like a well-known, if you know the movie Straight Outta Compton, like very challenge area. And so being on that basketball team as a kid, I got to see like what my friends' environment. So I spent like half my time in between these two very different worlds. And then just, again, like the service that my parents instilled, I always wanted to do something that had a purpose, but I also wanted to do something where we could create economic opportunity. And I really believe that that's a false choice. Like too often we're told like you can either make money or you can help people, but you don't get to do both. And we're fine paying people a lot of money if they do bad. We're totally good with that, but not if they want to do good. And I just think that makes no sense. In the world we're in now, we need business to be a force for good. Like governments are getting funded at every level. And so that's where really it came from. And that became a natural way to do it. But yes, it also from a pure business perspective, customers like to know that they're having an impact when they have this fun game. It's a form of entertainment that they can also feel good about.
And I suppose most people won't win, right? Because I don't know what the odds are on winning, but at least your subscription is funding a good cause. You're getting something, aren't you? You're either getting a charity donation or you may end up winning a house at some point.
That's right. And we have a bunch of smaller prizes and stuff like that people win. But yeah, most people are not going to win a house. But yes, they do. The community, the Omaze community really does care about like these tangible projects that they do. And oftentimes it benefits in their community, right? We did a house in Victoria Park last year to fund the London Air Ambulance, or these helicopter ambulances that pick up 3,000 Londoners a year. So Omaze funded that service, right? It wouldn't be here without the money from the Omaze community. And so like, that's also like, a nice loop.
You mentioned something earlier, which struck me about, the power of storytelling. And I believe you even take that as far as actually training people in the organization, don't you, around how to tell stories. Why is that so important? Because it strikes me that, pretty much anybody in their career needs the ability to be able to create a vision and communicate to people, whether it's internally, externally. And I think it's probably something that we don't train enough of. So how do you go about it in Omaze, and what kind of insights do you have on the importance of how you tell stories?
I totally agree with you, first of all. I think it's the most important and underrated skill in entrepreneurship. People like, it's obvious to see the impact on marketing, but it really like impacts everything you do, right? The ability to tell a good story matters a ton for fundraising from investors, right? That's mostly about story. People think it's mostly, metrics matter, but like story really matters. It's huge for setting a vision for your team. It's huge for recruiting. It's huge for product development, being able to see the world through the eyes of another, right? It's like, it has massive impacts throughout the business. It's important from a CFO to be a good storyteller, to be able to, and people on the finance team, like it touches everybody. In terms of how we teach it, we have our principles of storytelling. We're inspired by this book called Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. And so we take some of his principles, mix it with ours, and then we go through and we look at the brands that have won and beat their competitors over time, and explain through their storytelling why that worked or why that didn't. So we'll look at like, why did Spotify beat title that had Jay-Z and Beyonce and Madonna and everybody. You know, it wasn't the technology, it wasn't the distribution, it was the way that they did their storytelling. And so there's lots of principles, but the three that really matter is make the customer the hero, right? It's understanding the classic hero's journey that we all go through, right? A character wants something, they have a problem, they need a guide, they face some jeopardy, they have a transformation at the end. You want people to understand that. Clarity is key, right? People too often overcomplicate their message, and the human brain just wants to preserve calories. If you make it use a lot of calories to understand what you're doing, you'll lose. Like if you confuse, you'll lose. And that your brand is the guide, right? And the way you are a great guide is you show empathy and you show authority. So that's why it really is powerful if a brand can make someone laugh, right? Or cry, but that is a neurological shortcut to connection that shows empathy. If your brand can make you laugh, like that, you feel a connection, you remember that. And then authority is social proof, statistics, endorsements, all those things. So those are the three principles that we really focus on, is like make the customer the hero, clarity is key, we are the guide, not the hero, right? And then we have a bunch of principles underneath that.
No, they're really good. It's funny, actually. Our finance team at System One asked me to go and do a talk for them the other day about how to communicate. And it's really interesting because, I mean, if you're in a function like finance, sometimes people see you as kind of like the police or telling you what you can't do,
exactly,
or controlling your costs.
Yeah.
So it was really fun because they were like, how do we pivot that and present ourselves as a support for the organization, helping people do their jobs better? It's really, really good fun, actually, for me to try and unpack, I suppose, what comes naturally to me or what I instinctively do and break it down. But I found that very interesting. But some of the things that it made me think were, I mean, I know this is a classic one, but people remember how they feel more than, so feelings over facts, for example. If you make people feel something, they're far more likely to remember, years later. Or the element of surprise as well. I always, we lock on to, this is why behavioral science, I think, is so fascinating, isn't it? Because you think that's how it works, but actually it works like this. So, turning things on their head and surprising people, I think is really powerful. And one of the other things that struck me as well, that I've noticed in my career, is sometimes it's better to let other people tell your story.
Absolutely.
If you can get someone else to tell your story, people will believe it because people expect you to, sell yourself, Whereas if you can kind of get other people, a bit like having a podcast, you see. Great thing about a podcast is other people are telling your story rather than you as well. So it can be, quite powerful.
Absolutely. And we also teach the principles of influence in terms of at the beginning we had to get the most famous people in the world to do stuff with this brand of these young kids that didn't know what they're doing. And so whenever we would face an objection, let's say George Clooney's team was concerned about doing content in this way, we'd say, yeah, Bono's team had the same concern. And the reason that Bono made this decision was because X, Y, Z. And so therefore Bono is endorsing without, versus us just saying, oh yeah, we get it. We can do this. Like that has no credibility. Right. And so, it is like getting others to tell your story is really critical.
Totally. I mean, find the most influential person in your market.
Yes.
The most influential person to your target audience, and then get that person to basically endorse what you do. I think it's one of the most powerful kind of tactics out there that people just don't do that enough. It's the kind of earned media. Yeah.
I mean, it goes down to, if you look at first principles of why storytelling really matters, like you just got to understand, like our brains are constantly looking for ways to survive and thrive. Like it's constantly scanning, right? And so the reason like a lot of brands, like consumer brands, sell status is because we associate status with survival. Because if you didn't have status 150,000 years ago, you got left behind as a snack, right? And so that's really powerful in our neurology now. And so we're constantly looking for things that we think, okay, this is going to help me gain status or conserve financial resources or whatever. And so, but it's exhausting to constantly be searching for that. Our brain doesn't want to use many calories. And so if you have someone you can trust, that's like a shortcut. It's like, oh, that takes the work off me. That person seems to be surviving and thriving. I will therefore listen to them and that's why it works so powerfully.
Yeah, that makes sense. I had a look at your advertising. You've done quite a lot of advertising, and not just in my feed as well. Because I mean, it might be just because I'm aware of what you do, perhaps. But I swear I probably get more advertising from you than pretty much anyone else. It might be just how beautiful those Cotswold homes look, in the feed. But I did actually, because I got the benefit of the System 1 database, I did actually go and pull out the numbers, which were really interesting, actually. The first thing I thought was interesting is you've made more new ads than Apple over the last 5 years, which I thought was wild. So we've got 620 different versions of your advertising on our database. I don't know if you realised you'd made so much.
No. Wow.
But you've got a busy team out there.
I would imagine Apple would be at the top of the heap too, right?
Well, you didn't quite match Nike. So Nike have done 849 different ads. Yeah. These are audio visual. So we basically measure every new ad that breaks. And we define a new ad. It has to be different enough to what's gone before, in terms of time length or style or whatever. But every breaking new ad, every 24 hours, we test on our database and measure the emotional response to it. So we've automatically done that in the UK for about 6 years now. So we've got 6 years of data. Hence why I know, going back to 2020 rather, how your advertising is done. The other interesting thing as well, and credit to you, by the way, on this, is that you've steadily improved your scores over those 6 years, which is great. So as I was mentioning before, we kind of measure things in terms of emotional response and also have people recognize the brand. So on a 5-star scale, 6 years ago, you're averaging 1.6, you're now averaging 2.8. So getting close to double in terms of the emotion that people feel towards what you do. And then fluency is our version of branding. How many people can remember who you are at the end of the ad? The average in 2020 was 52%, and now it's 81%.
Wow. So, is 2.8 good, or is it just better?
2.8 is above average. The average for a lottery and casino, in the lottery and casino category, the average would be 2.4.
Okay.
So 2.8, so you've gone from behind the category to a little bit ahead of the category on average.
And what's who's the best in general?
Well, the best in, you have the number 5 ad of all time in that category. So there's your top scoring individual ad is 4.7.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, out of 5. So you've got 5.9 technically. It goes up to almost 6. So yeah, you've got the 5th best in. I'll have to look up who's number 1. I should do that.
Which UK
I didn't check out.
Be curious.
We'll set you the target of taking over number 1. But the interesting point about the data, which I was going to draw to your attention, is obviously emotion matters and the way you tell the story, because I think the ad with 4.7, it's 90 seconds and you see the reaction to people at the moment they realise they've won. And you also see the people responding to the charity donation. So you tying those two things together, the kind of surprise and emotion when people realise something life-changing is happening, and then you contrast that with the emotion of the charities that are being helped. So you've got double whammy in terms of emotions. You've got surprise and happiness coming through together. But the interesting thing I think about the data was your consistency. And this is where I wondered whether this is a conscious thing you made as a founder or not, because over the last 6 years, you've been very consistent in how you've shown up. And we did some research last year called Compound Creativity, where we actually looked at brands that are consistent in the way they execute their advertising over time. What happens is, it's the old phrase, familiarity breeds contentment, not contempt. So actually, the more, back to your behavioral science about recognizing signs and social proof, we like things that are familiar because we trust what we know, right? And so what you see is over years, the gap between brands that are consistent and brands that change their creative every year gets bigger and bigger. So yeah,
I mean, that's a credit to, if you don't mind me shouting out, Anushka, Mike, and Kat on our team have been there since the beginning, and they're really, really diligent about quality control. Like they really sweat it, and I think a lot of people make mistakes internally where they think, oh, this is getting boring. Like, and B, they assume because they're seeing it every day that it hasn't changed. But like the audience doesn't, like no one's thinking about you as much as you're thinking about you, right? And so our team is good at recognizing like small, like consistent iterations. So they definitely deserve credit, and they are intentional about that.
Well, kudos to them. And actually, that I'm not surprised you said that you've got the same team working on it.
Yeah.
That is exactly what I'd expect looking at the results, because
Yeah.
one of the predictors of success is the same team being in place. I mean, really good example in the UK would be Yorkshire Tea, which has just done a phenomenal job over the last 10 years, going from, I think, 16% market share to 40% market share in the tea category. The tea category in the UK is like the most old, stale, like nothing happens kind of category. And yet they've massively taken share, gone from number 3 to number 1. But if you dig into it, and they came second in our report of all brands that we assessed in terms of creative consistency, they've had the same management team, the same marketing team, same agency, the same idea, the same strategic insight. They changed the execution brilliantly. It's very fresh. It regularly changes, but the core idea and the way they come to market is exactly the same, and that really pays off.
You know, we believe a brand is just a representation, just an expression of your culture and your customers, right? And so we really work to make the customers the hero, and then we are really diligent about the culture. And your culture is just an expression of your, what we call virtues, right? Which are your daily actions. People think about brand as this kind of, esoteric, kind of ambiguous thing out there. It's not. It's just people, right? And so we really try to work hard to ground those virtues into our actions every day, and then allow that to come through. And then we really spend a lot of time on our brand book. We've created GPTs around that so people can use that to maintain consistency and all that kind of stuff. So that team really does care about it. So I'm glad it comes through.
Yeah, 100%. That's really good. I want to talk to you as well about what it's been like being a founder of the company and the journey you've been on. What, beyond the near-death experience, which obviously is quite high on the list of challenges, what have been the most challenging elements of being a founder?
I mean, we've had a lot of near-death experiences as a company, not just my own. You know, so much of entrepreneurship is just taking punches. You know, we call it type 2 fun. We're like, this really is not fun right now, but telling the story in a while from now will be fun. And so I think the biggest source of our resilience as a company through all those punches is laughter. Like, we really believe laughter is the shortest distance between two people. Like I said earlier, it's a kind of a neurological shortcut to connection, but it breeds resilience, right? If you can sit there and be like, wow, we are really getting punched right now. This is more like a face punch than a body blow, like that kind of stuff. But just like, if you can have fun with it, that's a big reason. And I think that's the hardest part about being a founder, is you care about this thing like you would a child, dedicated a lot of my life to this. And so doing whatever it takes to fight through those hard times, I think, is like the number one thing that you can do.
One book I came across a few years ago, which I absolutely love, go back to it time and again, is they're called The Founder's Mentality. And it's interesting because it looked at founder-led companies versus management-led companies, and how much founder-led companies outperform over the long run management-led ones. And I think the 3 principles they came up with was, one is having an owner's mindset. Like, you care about everything. If you own it, you literally care how everything is done. The next thing was frontline focus, which I thought was brilliant, which is basically being much, much closer to your customer. Is that founders typically, because the business grew up with them, they're much more likely to know their customer, spend time with their customer, be representative of their customer, than a management team, which rely on reports and departmental reviews and that kind of thing, which I thought was interesting. And then the final bit was obsession with how things are executed as well. Really, really tangible. Really know how to kind of get things done and make things happen. And it looked like those 3 elements were the key predictors of success for kind of founder companies versus management ones, which seems to ring true, certainly from the conversation we've had.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. So what advice would you give? So someone's sit here listening to you right now, and they're thinking, I'd like to create my own business. What tips would you give them?
The first tip I would give them is, nobody knows what they're doing.
That's pretty good.
So that's okay.
Yeah.
My business school class, we had a lot of really successful entrepreneurs. So I watched these guys who've built amazing businesses. They had no idea what they're doing. I certainly had less idea than them, what I was doing at the beginning. But I remember when I was starting on the journey feeling like, gosh, I'd look at these people that were successful and think, oh man, they understand things I don't. They have courage that I don't. They're not afraid like I am, all this stuff. And sometimes I've heard people say similar things to me now. Like they look at me and they think and I'm like, that is not me. Like I was very confused. And so that's okay. I think is the first thing. It's just like, let yourself know, it's really just about like getting a little bit better every day. I think that's the first thing I would say. And the second thing I would say is like become an expert storyteller. Whatever industry you're in, it serves you.
Isn't it? I had Scott Galloway on the podcast a few weeks ago.
Yeah,
and if you listen to that one, he's great. There's a couple of things he's wrong about, particularly brand, but anyway, put that to one side. But one of the things I really, I think he got absolutely right, is he talked about entrepreneurs, how they're basically very, very good salespeople. He said, you find any successful entrepreneur, and if they're not, they've got a number two who absolutely is. They've got to learn, the first thing is they've got to learn the art of rejection. Like it's no, and then yes, right? So first of all, you've got to learn the art of rejection. Secondly, you've got to be able to sell. He said, if you don't sell, you're sunk, basically. You've got to, whether it's investors or customers or the internal team, you've constantly got to have the ability to sell. And that's where I think you're absolutely right about storytelling is to keep people on the journey and to get everyone, moving in the right direction. You've got to be absolutely brilliant at telling the story of the business and where you're going.
I mean, that's all it is at the beginning, right? Like all it is a story, right? Next year Omaze is just a story. Right. But the world is always changed by stories. It's always changed by, hey, this is where we are. This is our reality. We can be this other place. I can see it. Let's go there together. That is how it all works, And so you've got to be able to see that clearly, paint that clearly, and make people understand how they can go on that journey with you.
Well, very interesting, and tying it back to actually where we started with your near-death experience and the stories we tell ourselves. I think the thing that stops you stops people is that fear. The fear that the story won't play out the way that they hope it will. And I think that's why probably, I think, there's a brilliant quote, I quote this all the time, but Greg Hahn, who was on the pod last year, said, what would you do if you weren't afraid? I think it's just the most brilliant question, because you got to start there, removing the fear and going, actually, what would we do if we weren't afraid? And then build the story around that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you're right. The fear can be your inverse story. Like we talk a lot about trying to tap into a childlike imagination, because, when you're a child, you use your imagination to think about what's possible. And when you're an adult, you tend to use your imagination to think about what could go wrong.
Yeah. And
so like, how do you let that go? How do you let the things that did go wrong not inform what could go right in the future?
Yeah. And it's that old quote, I can't remember quite who said it, but you win 100, you lose 100% of the bets you never place.
Yes.
Which is true, isn't it? You got no chance of winning unless you take the bet.
Yeah. And they have all these studies and stories, and it sounds obvious, but it's helpful to hear sometimes all the time about people at the end of their life when they look back at the regrets. It's never what they did.
Yeah.
It's always what they didn't do.
Yeah. 100%. Well, on that bombshell, I think we'll leave everyone with that thought in mind to think about what they will do from listening to this episode. Matt, thank you so much, mate. It's been great to talk to you, and very pleased that you got through your near-death experience and get to tell the story.
Thank you. Thanks, John. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for putting wisdom out in the world. This is really helpful.
Cool. Good to see you. Thank you. Thank you very much for listening or watching Uncensored CMO. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, please do hit the subscribe button wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching, hit subscribe there as well. I'd also love to get a review. Reviews make a big difference on other people discovering the show. So please do leave a review wherever you get your podcast. If you want to contact me, you can do. I'm over on X @UncensoredCMO or on LinkedIn, where I'm under my own name, John Evans. Thanks for listening and watching. I'll see you next time.